Good afternoon. When I announced my recommended budget last December, as you recall, my priorities were pretty clear. The first one was putting children, families, and education first. The second was to invest in jobs and innovation, and the third was to reduce the cost of state government. What I attempted to do is balance the ongoing fiscal challenges that have been facing our state with the need to begin to reinvest in strategies that were most likely to benefit our citizens. And as you know, this budget contained two particularly controversial elements, which were difficult proposals in their own right to both Republicans and the Democrats. The first proposal was to make modifications to the Oregon Public Employee Retirement System, and the second was to balance those changes with increased revenues to apply to the budget. The purpose of those two proposals was both to reduce one of the major cost drivers, that's diverting resources from our classrooms and from other important public services, and also begin to reinvest in those public services, particularly in the area of public education. I included these proposals because after struggling with the Great Recession over the last few years, it's clearly time that this state begin to reinvest in our human capital. And we have the opportunity to do that today. Now, if you recall, the challenge last session was to erase a $3.2 billion budget deficit, to stabilize our budget, to reduce our reliance on one-time revenues, and to begin to transform our healthcare system to improve outcomes and to reduce cost, to make more room in the budget going forward for reinvestment in families and education. As you also know, the legislature rose to that challenge, coming together to achieve all of those things with a solid bipartisan effort that was unheard of in many parts of the United States. I believe we can do that again. So the challenge this session is a little different. It's to build on the foundation we laid in the last biennium, to continue the transformation of our healthcare system, which has already saved us $100 million in the next biennial budget, to begin to bend down the cost curve in the Department of Corrections while still keeping Oregonians safe, and to begin to turn the corner on the teacher layoffs and the cut school days that have plagued our system of public education over the past few years. All of those things are necessary if we are to meet our aspirational 40-40-20 goals and to ensure that every Oregonian has their shot at the American dream. The co-chair's budget that was produced last March reflected the same basic priorities: putting children, families, and education first, investing in jobs and innovation, and reducing the cost of government. They proposed in that budget modifications to the Public Employees Retirement System, new revenue, including a larger state school fund and targeted strategic investments, and a continuation of the transformation of our healthcare system. Now, even with that budget, we're still likely to see layoffs in some school districts, increased tuition in community colleges and universities, and inadequate resources in other critical areas like child protective services. And without the new revenues called for in the co-chair's budget, the situation will be far, far worse for public education, for public safety, and for our social safety net. So we've come to this very pivotal point in the 2013 legislative session because we've reached an apparent impasse over changes to the PERS system and raising new revenue, which were included in both my recommended budget and in the co-chair's budget that was created last March. Now, the Democrats in this budget not only proposed changes to the Public Employees Retirement System, they've actually passed them in Senate Bill 822, which passed along strictly partisan lines and made a modification in the cost of living adjustment for retirees, which came to my desk and which I signed on May 6th. But we still need new revenues to make this budget work if we're going to meet our responsibilities to our citizens, new revenues that are essential to continue our economic recovery and to the well-being of our citizens. Now, the nature of this impasse is well known to you. It is based on the one hand on the unwillingness of the Republicans to raise new revenues until we do further modifications to the PERS system, and the unwillingness of many Democrats to make further modifications to the PERS system, given the fact that they've already done so in Senate Bill 822. In my judgment, we simply cannot allow this impasse to impede the thoughtful development of a budget and the orderly conclusion of the 77th legislative session. After 14 years in the legislature and 10 years as governor, I am acutely aware of the fact that after tomorrow's revenue forecast, the Ways and Means Committee is going to have to make a fundamental decision. either to build a budget around the anticipation of new revenues, or to simply build a budget around existing revenues that may be supplemented by the forecast. So the legislature here on the 15th of May stands at a crossroads. We can either commit ourselves to a framework to move beyond this partisan impasse and generate additional changes to our public employees retirement system and additional tax revenues, or we need to simply balance the budget with existing revenues and go home. It's not a complicated choice, but the choice has to be made because we're running out of time. A partisan impasse is not what Oregonians expect from a legislature that adopted a historic bipartisan approach to addressing the huge budget crisis that this state faced just 2 years ago. I'm here today to offer a proposal which I believe creates a bipartisan pathway to create a budget of which all of us can be proud, and an alternative to simply balancing with the revenue forecast and adjourning with budgets that are not as robust as they should be, and a PERS liability that is not as low as it should be. We don't have to do that. It's a two-part proposal. The first part deals directly with the major impasse that this session is bumped up against, which is the trade-off between additional changes in the public employees retirement system and new revenue. After thoughtful deliberations and a number of difficult conversations, I am proposing additional reforms to the public employees retirement system in the form of a modification in the use of money match by inactive members. These changes, in combination with the changes already made in Senate Bill 822, will produce up to $902 million of savings in this biennium, this coming biennium, and more importantly, a reduction of up to $4.2 billion in the unfunded actuarial liability, a reduction of nearly 25%. Now, to balance these additional changes to the public employees retirement system, I'm calling for $200 million in new revenue. That is revenue that requires a supermajority and therefore votes from both sides of the aisle. As you know, there have been ongoing revenue discussions in both chambers and involving both parties, and a variety of options have been vetted. It is my belief that $200 million in the context of a $15 billion budget is not a very high bar. Now, I offer this proposal in the interest of moving beyond the current impasse to find a bipartisan pathway, a bipartisan budget, and an orderly conclusion to the current legislative session. You will note that the $200 million that I have proposed is less than the resources proposed in the co-chair's budget, which is a reflection of anticipated increase in revenue by the forecast that will come out tomorrow. This framework to me offers the opportunity for a true compromise, because everybody involved has got to take a step towards the center, towards an Oregon solution to meet the challenges faced by our state and by the citizens that all of us were elected to represent. The second part of the proposal, which is to seriously evaluate a revenue idea that has been championed by Senator Boquist and by Senator George, to reduce tax rates for Oregon small businesses, which are huge job creators in the midst of this recession. This would be a freestanding effort that would be separate from the framework I just described to resolve the impasse over PERS and new revenues to be applied to the budget. And while not tied to the first element, I am committed to working diligently to see if we can get this proposal ready for action by the current legislative session. So towards that end, I'm proposing the creation of a bipartisan legislative work group to further develop this idea. My office would make available policy staff and agency staff to support the effort, and I would recommend that the work group report to the bipartisan legislative leadership by June 1st. Now, before I wrap this up, I just want to make it very, very clear to everyone that we certainly can balance this budget with revenues based on the May forecast without any additional resources to these budgets, without any additional changes in the public employees retirement system. I think we're better than that. I don't think that's the first choice, my first choice or the first choice of most Oregonians. I have presented this proposal to President Courtney, to Speaker Kotek, to Senator Ferrioli, and to Representative McLean over the course of the past day and a half. But the fact is we're simply running out of time. So I am therefore calling on the bipartisan legislative leadership, both chambers, both parties, to seriously consider this proposal to take it to their caucuses and to let me know by the end of tomorrow. If the leadership of both parties is unwilling or unable to embrace a bipartisan effort to bring this session to a conclusion, one that includes additional revenue, one that includes meaningful PERS reform to bring about a 25% reduction in the unfunded actuarial liability, then I will call on legislative leadership to begin on Monday developing and passing budgets based on the May revenue forecast so that we can bring this session to an orderly conclusion by the end of next month. It is my hope, however, that the legislature will embrace this proposal in the same spirit of bipartisanship, which was the hallmark of the 2011 and 2012 legislative sessions. You happy to answer any questions?
Based on your conversation with the leaders, is there any willingness on their part to talk, or are you doing this so that you can add a little public?
No, I will have to say that the conversations we had were non-committal on all sides. As you know, there is a real resistance for a valid set of reasons about doing additional changes to the PERS system, and there is resistance for a different set of valid reasons on arranging revenue. The point is we have to make a call here. It's the middle of May. We're supposed to be out of here by the end of June or very early July. Just the mechanics of moving a budget through this building and deliberatively building those budgets in a way that's responsible takes quite a bit of time. And we can't continue this chicken-egg discussion. It's who's going to move first. And so I'm simply attempting to break the deadlock by trying to offer a proposal that makes everyone stretch a little bit, but I think is in the interest of the state. And we have a history of bipartisan cooperation and collaboration over the last 2 years, and I don't think we should walk away from it.
Where would you put all your extra money that you're saving and getting from that?
So with the co-chair's budget, assuming that they got the $275 million revenue proposal that they based it upon, still leaves some school districts, Hillsborough, probably Eugene, some districts and others faced with some teacher layoffs. It still leaves significant tuition increases in community colleges and higher education. It still leaves us short on the kind of reinvestment I think the Senate President has called for in mental health. It probably leaves staffing ratios inadequate in child protective services. So it's an okay budget, but it's not the kind of budget that represents the opportunity to begin to rebuild from the foundation we laid last session. So I would apply that. I would recommend applying a chunk of that to education to address and not just K through 12, P through 20 education, to address those, to try to really minimize the impact on layoffs and to try to mitigate some of the tuition increase, and some of it, quite frankly, into the human service area, into child protective services and into mental health.
So is your money match proposal going to replace the budget note that came with 822, the proposal to defer 1.9% of the rate increase? So
the mechanics of this is, as if you were to do the short answer is yes, because as you increase the PERS savings, you actually reduce the amount of collaring that's in the proposal. So it does two things. This proposal, an additional $200 million in additional changes in PERS, do two things that are significantly important. They reduce the collaring, which really is pushing the problem down the road. They give us the ability to have really respectable education budgets, and because it reduces one of the cost drivers in those budgets, it will make it easier for us to sustain and continue that investment in future biennium.
Why are you looking only at the inactives? Why not apply the money match to actives too?
Well, it's called how far you can push the envelope, and this is not easy. Doing additional changes on PERS is very difficult for many members in this chamber, many of whom have already voted to do something that I think a lot of people thought was not within the realm of political possibility in January. It's equally difficult, I think, for many members in the legislature to raise new revenues. What I'm simply saying is we need to get out of this. We need to step back and take the 60,000-look view here. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is recover from this recession. What we're trying to do is make sure we stop laying off teachers. At the same time, we want to make sure the money we spend on education ends up in the classroom. We need to invest in mental health. We've all been stirring up about gun control. Well, investments in mental health improve public safety. So this has become a tight debate over dollars and purrs, and we need to step back and take a deep breath and say, what are we here for? And I bet you that every Republican and every Democrat in this building is here basically for the same thing. It's to do the right thing for Oregon, and this is not a heavy lift, and it's not a very far step to the middle. And we got to reach there and shake hands and put this to bed and go home.
The only one that doesn't have a number is the small business tax reduction. Do you have a cap on that expenditure?
So and this is a question you should probably ask to Senator George and Boquist, but as I understand it, it essentially lowers rates for small businesses, which creates obviously a budget liability. And the question is, how do you fill that? There's also a proposal that's been discussed, and I am not familiar with the details of this, by Representative Bailey, that would modify the tax brackets in our personal income tax code to make them more progressive, which actually increases revenue. So the question is whether you could marry those and get a proposal that's essentially revenue neutral, but reduces the tax rate on small businesses and makes our tax code more progressive. That sounds like a good place to go. I mean, if we can get there, I'm all for it. And as I said, I'm very serious about trying to facilitate and do what we can to flesh that out. But I also want to make it clear it's a separate question from the larger challenge of trying to get new revenue into the budget and reduce the cost of the PERS system going forward.
How hard is your end of the day tomorrow deadline? I mean, what if they say, well, we're still working on this, give us time.
Well, I will still call at that point. I'm going to assume that we're not really serious about finding a solution that involves new revenue and additional PERS changes, because, even if they started Monday, they've got to make some assumptions about the budget when they put it together. And I believe at that point, this isn't a complicated proposal. None of these are new ideas. This one, I think, is very politically possible if we have the political will to do it. So at that point, I don't. All I can do is recommend. The leadership will have to make this decision. But I think if people basically walk away or want more time, I mean, we've been in here since February. Hello. We ought to conclude this thing and move forward on whatever path the leadership chooses to take.
What are you going to do if tomorrow the leadership in one chamber says, sure, we're on board, we want to do this, and the other one says, no?
Then I will call for an expedited Ways and Means process that balances the budget with the existing revenue so that we can go on the end of the month, next month.
What's your anticipation of what the forecast is going to be?
We believe it'll be up. I don't know how much up, but we believe it'll be up some. Yep.
How confident are you about the money match proposal holding up to a court challenge?
We have a legal opinion which we handed out. If you didn't get one, we'll give it to you. We're very confident that both the changes in 822 and the money match will meet legal muster.
Do you have confidence where that $200 million should come from? The House plan relied larger corporations and individuals?
Well, at the end of the day, it's going to be something that can get votes on both sides of the aisle. So that puts some sideboards on it. I'm pretty agnostic. Again, I think $200 million in the context of a $15 billion budget is not a very heavy lift, and there are a variety of ideas that have been floated out there, and I'm very confident that any combination of those can get us that amount of revenue. Thank you.